everyone. So we are going to hand it over to Angela Flores, who is here with us today. And then I will go ahead and introduce the program that we have planned. So help me in welcoming Angela Flores, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone see the presentation slides? Okay, great. All right, so my name is Angela Flores, co-founder, co-facilitator of the Eastside Cafe. We are in our 20th year as an autonomous cultural community space. Thank you, Santiago and Lucha, for inviting us to be hosts. The timing, couldn't be better. I'm also a co-founder and communications manager with the Eastside Community Land Trust. And lastly, my family and I have been tenants of a very infamous slumlord called Caltrans. So our story begins in 1992. Our family moved into a Caltrans home without realizing it was the worst slumlord in all of California. And after 2 years living in this home, my father, a professor, whom you'll probably meet later, had left in 1994 to be a human rights observer to the Mayan indigenous population of the Tzotzil, Tzetzal, Mam, Chol, and Tojoloval, and they called themselves the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico. They rose up against the violence from their government, and my dad came back not only bringing back so much precious knowledge and reflection on indigenous sovereignty and reclamation, but he was suddenly confronted with housing issues and discovered a movement that was already happening. So we had two parallel movements merging. We had the Zapatismo, and we had housing justice, and then we created the Eastside Cafe. So the Eastside Cafe Collective started in 2001 as an informal group of folk having serious dialogue, which we called pláticas, and on the social and economic issues we faced. Most of the folks were who organized were people who resonated with the Zapatistas. And a lot of them were made up of our own neighbors, Caltrans tenants as well. So in 2002, we had our first official event and mercado at the Mazatlan Theater in El Sereno, and began our first wave of mobile events and mercados all over East LA to talk about the importance of self-determination. And our slogan was not a place, but a state of mind. Here is our flyer. Unfortunately, we don't have any photos, but this is actually a magnet that was created by our in-house artist, Jose Ramirez. In 2004, the Eastside Cafe Brick and Mortar Space was founded by local East LA residents, Caltrans tenants, who saw a need to create a space not just as an organizing space, but also as a cultural arts space. BIPOC communities in Northeast LA lacked, and still to this day, lack artistic venues for community convening. And inspired by the Zapatistas, we created our own autonomous artistic collectives that will allow for creative agency and determination for self-preservation. We have been a community cultural hub and safe space for artivism and political discourse that are affecting our communities. Topics range from immigrant rights, anti-Blackness, femicide, LGBTQIA, housing, indigenous rights, all within the framework of decolonization. So right here, the blue space this is our space, but now it says that this here and now space is also our space. Here are the collectives. This is a meeting that we had. We look very serious, but I can assure you we are a very fun and engaging people. These are just a few of our collectives, of all of our collectives. This is the Capoeira Collective, which began in 2017. This is our Son Jarocho Collective, and we started right when we got the brick and mortar building in 2004. This is our Yoga Collective, also in 2017. And so that's just a few. And this is how we make decisions. Our governance structure model is also our logo. There is no top-down system here. As you can see, it is a pre-Columbian flower stamp, and it's very horizontal. Horizontality, we believe horizontality, inclusivity is important in base building. And believing and supporting one another's projects, we know is a way to self-empowerment and decolonizing methodologies. We are consensus-based and organized via group text, which is a great organizing tool, in case you didn't know. And so from this model, we've managed to build community projects as collective members. We're focused some of us are focused in our circles. At some points, we ask everyone to participate in all hands on deck projects. So the community garden located across the street is actually a project that we created since the beginning. It's a branch of the Eastside Cafe. It's at a community fridge, which we launched during the pandemic. In this area is a food desert, so we can see how it's benefited the community. And then finally, a community project would be Reclaiming Our Homes. Inspired by Moms for Housing, Reclaiming Our Homes was a group of homeless families or housing insecure who turned activists and decided to occupy abandoned Caltrans homes to send a message to the world about growing homeless crises and the market of commodifying housing, and to expose Caltrans as the leader in this profiting and exploiting of the poor. These are Zapatista dichos and also the Eastside Cafe values. And I will say them in English. In the beginning it says Spanish, but I'll say them in English. A world where many worlds fit. We are equals because we are different. Everything for everyone, nothing for ourselves. Propose and don't impose. Construct and don't destroy. Serve and don't be self-serving. Obey and don't command. Convince and don't defeat. I'm so sorry, I can't see it. Represent and don't supplant. And then these are our value systems and what we work with. What does it mean to decolonize, and how do we get back to humanity? Now that we set the tone after 20 years, now that we've had the discussions and the reflections, how do we work together? How do we address injustices so that we can move forward in supporting upward mobility in our communities? These are the types of decolonial working methods we utilize. Self-determination, the power to make our own decisions on our own terms. Autonomy to build community empowerment and resources. Horizontality, governance, building leadership. Transparency, asking permission from each other. Sweat equity, putting in the hours and making sacrifices. The echo networks, cultivating and establishing relationships. Mutual aid. We have a food desert in our area, and so we also do food distribution. And interdependence, being independent from the government, but not being independent from the community, relying on each other. And so I'll leave you with this last Zapatista value. Lento pero avanzamos, slowly we advance. And we often have to look at this one as we progress and as we advance slowly. Things do take time, but they happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. I think this is a really important discussion that we're having today. I'm going to shift over to introducing the program, and I realized that I didn't even introduce myself. So for those of you that do not know me, I am Associate Professor of Chicanic Studies at Rio Hondo College. I'm happy to be here in community with all of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to try to keep this very brief. before I introduce our moderator for today's programming. So, amidst the social unrest and devastation of the pandemic, we all know that it's important that we collectively witness and hold space for one another to listen, share, and sustain the practical tools that could enable us to learn, heal, and thrive. So this is why this programming was really born out of that sentiment that we as educators in the classroom and outside in the community spaces really have the power to create solutions to old problems, but to also reimagine new futures. Sharing and creating knowledge offers us all the opportunity to reclaim the loss of value, dignity, and joy that we all deserve. We are inviting you all, welcoming you to join us as we learn from and with one another. The program that we have prepared for you is an ofrenda to our communities. This offering is meant to sustain the public's engagement with education and learning. We know learning is lifelong. It doesn't just happen within the context of schools. And so feel free to open or create a bookmark on the program that we have prepared for you. And Encuentro, for those of you that don't know, is a conversation. It's an exchange of ideas. We welcome each of you to ask questions, to comment, to provide feedback. You will see that we have a set of 7 community agreements. So if I move over to the contents here, you could select on any of these. And so if I go to the community agreements that we have created, we ask that you adhere to these agreements by participating today to make sure that everyone has a positive experience. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through these. You'll also see that for today's Encuentro, we did have some central questions that our speakers are going to touch upon today. And here in the bottom, you'll see that you all have access to a Google folder that we created. And in this folder, if you open it up, you'll see that there are folders for all of the presenters of today where they will be sharing the materials that you'll get access to after. So I know that sometimes when we attend events, we're so busy like taking notes or trying to gather resources. So I really hope that by having everything here for you, that you could really be present in today's programming. You feel free to create a bookmark on this so that you could come back to it later, because we will also be including the recording for today on there. So shifting to the program that we have, the speakers that we have called upon will collectively aid us in reimagining our roles as student teachers, scholars in and out of educational institutions. In our professions, we must be prepared to understand and tackle issues of community health, wellness, and medicine. The speakers of today will help us in really beginning this conversation and restoring the critical hope that's necessary, that has haunted us by all of the loss that we have endured because of the pandemic. So in the spirit of creating knowledge, community, and healing, I am excited to welcome you all, and I hope that you enjoy today's program. Next up, I want to hand it over to Claudia Itzel Marquez, who will be moderating today's programming. So before I do so, I just want to share a little bit about Claudia for those of you who have never heard of her. Claudia is an independent researcher with a focus on Mesoamerican art and tools used in the field of marriage and family therapy. Her latest research examines the use of ritual and ceremonial tools in the cultivation and preservation of family health and well-being. As a devoted mother of 3 and art therapist of Colima Chicana ancestry, she is concerned with the ancestral knowledge and daily life activities of mothers, children, and transitional birthing forms. Currently, Claudia serves as a clinician for the West Covina School District at an elementary school, offering mental health services to elementary school students. Claudia also provides suicide awareness and prevention workshops related to mental health for the school district. So help me in welcoming our moderator for today, Claudia. Feel free to share your favorite emoji in the chat. Let's all welcome Claudia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lucha. Thank you, Angela, Santiago. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to share a slide with you all. Okay, here we go. So I just want to start off by, again, saying thank you and saying that I'm honored to be here and I'm looking forward to learning from everyone here today. I want to start by sharing like my early understanding of medicine. And when I think about medicine, I think about, a lot of experiences I had in my childhood, with my mom. And I grew up in a single parent household. So my mom was always working, but she always made time to take care of us. And so I remember, being a little girl and just telling her, Mom, my stomach hurts, no me siento bien, and she would always follow up by asking, well, ¿qué es lo que sientes? What are you feeling? What emotion is behind that? And looking back now, those were the early lessons that I got in relationship to the body, mind, and spirit. And, she would follow up with these questions that would really make me think about what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it. And she would say, okay, déjate voy a hacer un té. Or, okay, deja saco mi huevo y te voy a hacer una limpia. And, I didn't understand now, but a lot of the things that she did, were in relationship to my health and just shifting the energy within me and around me. And so those are my early lessons, in medicine and medicina. And, I didn't see it in that way when I was a kid. I always thought, okay, we get medicine from a doctor. But looking back now, I understand that, within my family, within my household, those were our medicinas, those were our remedios. And it came in the form of, tés, and came in the form of consejos, and came in the form of connecting with other families. Like, let's go with Doña Rosa, a ver qué nos dice, And so, with that, the early community health building came into place. And so I share that story because I know that many of us can connect to those experiences, early on. Someone in our lives taught us what to do to feel better. And so in the slide, I show pictures. So fast forwarding to, my life now, I carry on a lot of those lessons. And many of them now come from family, friends, and community. And, earlier Angela shared about the Eastside Cafe. And I think that, those community spaces are so important in cultivating community health, because those spaces allow for each one of us to exist and be, who we are. We are surrounded by people who validate us, who understand us, and who have similar values. These past 2 years have been life-changing for many of us, as many of us have, isolated, and in that isolation have self-reflected and have, really built community in different ways. I think that isolation really pushed us to connect with one another and to find ways to help each other be healthy and just be good. I know that COVID, highlighted a lot of the disparities that have already existed in our communities. We know that people of color have historically experienced a lot of, lack of resources. They don't have access to proper health care, nutritious food, access to nutritious foods, clean water, and so with COVID, really amplifying all those disparities, I feel like our communities really stepped it up and created sustainable forms of care. Earlier Angela talked about the community fridge. A lot of mutual aid movements also grew out of COVID. And I see a lot of community building continuing to happen, right? Because it's not just what we have gone through, but what we are, putting back together or choosing not to put back together, right? There's this whole conversation about, is it going to go back to normal? Well, we don't know. But what we do know is that we're going to, work together to create sustainable forms of care in our communities. And so I just want to, encourage you all to participate in the chat, to share things that you've, done it in your family, within your family, in your communities, and to just engage in the chat when, if the if the presenters say something that really resonates with you, or you have a comment or a question, to just please include it in the chat. And I want to transition and introduce our next presenter, Tina Orduno Calderon. So, did I stop sharing already? My screen? Yes. Okay. So, Tina Orduno Calderon is a culture bearer of Gabrielino, Tongva, Chumash, and Yoeme descent. She is a wife, mother, grandmother, sister, and auntie to many. Tina is a singer who also enjoys composing poems and songs. To date, she has composed over a dozen songs in her ancestral languages of Tongva and Chumash. Additionally, Tina is a traditional dancer and storyteller who strongly believes in honoring her ancestors by sharing her history and culture. Tina mentors several youth groups. She works with various environmental organizations, consults for schools, serves on several boards, and holds a few advisory positions in the educational and environmental fields. So please join me. I see Jessa. So I introduced Jessa's mom, but I'll go ahead and introduce Jessa as well. Jessa, thank you for joining us. Like Tina, Jessa holds a lot of these values. She's also a songwriter, a published author, poet, hip-hop artist, and performer. She's a massage therapist, a hypnotherapist, an energy worker, and offers guided meditations. Jenna encourages our community and youth to find their healing mentally, physically, and spiritually by sharing her words, music, and practices. Jessa has had the honor to work with community and youth from many nations, helping them find themselves while helping them to feel good about themselves. So thank you, Jessa, for joining us this morning. And please, everyone, join me in the chat in welcoming Jessa.
Natanya ne Jessa Calderon, Tongat Naha, Koi Mixkanakan, Koi Yoeme. I am all those things, but I am also working with Sacred Places Institute as their water, land, as well as everything else, protector, programs directors. So I'm glad to be here with you all, and I understand that the theme here today is health and medicine among urban school systems. So I am pretty comfortable in this element. I guess it all starts with, obviously the colonization, the most recent times where we have been conditioned and forced out of our traditions, which then forces us to be disconnected. We're forced to be, not just disconnected from ourselves, but each other. One of our biggest phrases that I think is shared in the urban community is every man for himself. And that's a big red flag about how we're being taught to be disconnected. So I think it's really important to start demanding, I would say requesting, but I feel more we're at a point of demanding that our public funding and our school dollars are actually truly being used for the things of importance. And, when you think about like the black tops that were put on for the schools and how it brought so much heat, but it was also bringing us disconnection from the earth. So it's really time to remove those things and bring forth soil regeneration and community gardens. And that includes the gardens at the schools, where the youth can start connecting to the land, connecting to the plant life, and connecting to themselves, as well as connecting to each other. I know for us Native folk in this entire continent, we all have creation stories. And some of these creation stories kind of remind us of how we're connected to the earth and connected to the sky. I know, like the Chumash story, for example, talks about how back on the island of Limu, we emerged from the soil, but what was happening was it was like visualized like a seed pod in the ground. And from the sky came a bolt of lightning from what we know as the Milky Way. Came a bolt of lightning, that energy force, right, came into those seeds and brought the life, and that's where the human emerged. So we have the connection to both. And so it's like when we're disconnected from the earth and disconnected from each other, all of those stories mean nothing to us. But when we start to have those connections, it makes so much sense when you go through the genetics and how things are created, and understanding that the nutrients of the soil is the same nutrients that we need to thrive and survive, and that includes the stones, right? Like the minerals. Those are all the things that we're actually made of. So that being said, there's also, with the nutrients and all of that, there's also the energy force, right? So when you think about plants, and if you actually grow plants and you ever watch the way a flower can, follow the sun, and once the sun goes down, the flower closes, but when the sun comes up, the flower opens up again. And the way it reacts, that's energy moving it, right? And there's vibrations running through this flower, running through these plants at all moments in time. And those same vibrations run through us. But because of the disconnection, those vibrations can cause us to actually vibrate on a lower frequency, which causes war, which causes anger, which causes frustration. It's what's causing so much disruption in our communities. But when we're connected to those plants and connected to the water, connected to the soil, we can raise those vibrations again. And that's when we start vibrating in love. We're in connection with ourselves, causing us to be in connection with each other, and we start understanding things from a deeper, broader perspective. And then, when we think about, okay, so now we're getting to the community gardens, we're getting to the soil regeneration. What else can we do, in that process to help us, and one of the biggest things that I can say I did prior to the pandemic, which carried me through the pandemic in a good way, was actually having an antiviral diet. And so that looked more like plant-based, which doesn't mean you can't have meat, right? Because when you look back to our ancestors on this continent, meat was a part of the staple. There was also salmon and trout type foods that were being utilized. But think about how it wasn't an everyday food. Like here in California, the number one staple food was actually acorn. So even though we had elk and we had antelope and we had deer, we had these meats, they weren't part of the every single day process, right? And so we also had nopales and prickly pears, or the tunas, and that's an important food today when we think about antiviral, right? Like the qualities of the cactus are so rich, and that's why it's still a staple food for us today. That is one of the best foods that we can have to keep us healthy. Other foods that we could think about growing: cucumber, chayote, bell pepper, avocado. And honestly, most of the greens that grow in your neighborhood or your backyard are probably going to be beneficial. A lot of them are actually going to be, minus the mustard greens. I'm not saying those aren't good for you, but those are hella invasive. We have the wild arugula and the Apache spinach that tends to grow. So those are things you can look into as well. And then, of course, ingesting herbs like lemon balm and lavender have health benefits. But if you're looking to benefit like the land base of where you're at, depending on where you're at, I would say talk to the native people in your area, because the plants actually change in every area, including like there's chaparral areas traditionally, there's forest areas traditionally, there's like the more water-based areas. And so there's going to be different plants, but the most noted plants that grow pretty much everywhere would be kind of like the black sage, the sagebrush, the white sage. Hummingbird sage does like to grow more in the coastal area, but it's a beautiful plant. Mugwort and elderberry, those are all antiviral and all grow pretty much everywhere. And then, going into the schools and let's say for whatever reason the funding isn't available because some way, somehow in poor communities, they tend to not be for some reason, right? Like buses being sent to the richer schools when they're actually needed over here and so on. So a tool that can be utilized in classrooms without funding is breath work and energy work. Just kind of guiding the students to close their eyes, start taking their deep breaths in through their nose, exhaling slowly out through their mouth, and having them one area at a time, focus. And so like with every breath in, focus in the brain and bring unconditional, loving, healing vibrations into the brain, and exhale any stagnant energy out through the mouth, right? Focus on the throat and how the throat is used to communicate and have clear communication and to get your point across in a loving and humble manner. Focus on the eyes and how we can see things from broader perspectives, to see the beauty in everything, to see the truth in everything. Focus, on the mouth and the health of the mouth, and how everything that we ingest is love, and how everything that we speak is love. Focus on the neck and the shoulders and release the tension, right? And like just kind of go down the entire body. Focus on the functioning of the body, right? Like the organs, and how when we focus on each and every one of them and how that they're working in love and how they're constantly working for us every single day, and how that actually translates to unconditional love, and how our bodies love us unconditional, to kind of bring that perspective of like, if our bodies love us unconditional, are we doing that same in return? And to help us to identify that we should and could be treating our bodies with a lot more love and respect, and gratitude for the fact that they keep us going every single day. And just kind of like understanding that all of this is linked with with the vibrations and the energy, right? And so it's the energy that allows our cells and our organs and our bodies to function. And it's what calls experiences to us, right? Like where our thoughts channel to is actually a lot of what we're calling to ourselves. And even those of us who might seem like the most uppity, positive people, always spreading love around, sometimes it's even us who are speaking negatively to ourselves, right? Not being the most positive to ourselves. And even though no one else around us hears it, it's how we're treating ourselves. And that's the kind of stuff that we're bringing in. So it's really important to teach these students and ourselves how to change these loops in our mind. And so when doing this breath work and doing this energy work, that's stuff that we can start focusing on, how to, identify that we need to treat ourselves kindly. We need to speak to ourselves kindly and understand that we're all connected, right? So like the way that I speak to myself internally, the way that I feel about myself, the way that I treat myself is how I'm reflecting that to each and every one of you all, because we're all connected. And so identifying that I need to treat myself with love and respect, that I need to speak to myself gently and kind, and then understanding that when I'm doing that to myself, I'm able to go out to each and every one of you and treat you with the love and respect that you deserve. Why? Because we're all sacred, right? And that's something that has been taken from us. We've been stripped away from that understanding that we're all sacred. And so that's something that as teachers, we can gently remind our students and remind ourselves, right? And because we're obviously going to lead by example. And so having them understand the importance of this energy, right? And even have them do little practices where, they, like, what's one thing that you want to see happen, a small thing, something that can be possible, like this, focus on that small thing, and every single day with complete urgency and understanding that it's possible, speak that thing. On my way to school, every light will be green. And to be able to see that the way that we think and the way that we believe are actual things that we can shape in our lives and bring to ourselves. And when we start teaching this to ourselves and our community members and our youth, it starts reshaping our community in a way that really brings up love, where we no longer say, well, you want to be XYZ. Oh, you want to be a published author. Well, that's impossible because you're just a little scumbag from the hood, and you're supposed to be in juvenile hall by the time you're 13, right? Like, if I really listened to my teachers that were teaching me that, I wouldn't be a published author. But I had every belief in my mind that there was a different way, because I was very blessed and fortunate to be around the medicine people in our communities, that I was able to see that, like, I don't want to call it magic, but for lack of a better word, that magic is real, right? That, like, the possibilities of healing, of being, and just knowing there's so much beauty that actually does exist and can exist when we go back to the old ways, when we go back to non-Westernized ways of thinking and being. And so I know it can feel like a struggle in the communities that we're in, because so many of our loved ones, and sometimes selves included, we're stuck in these loops. We're stuck in these beliefs, right? Like, so many of my friends growing up, they truly believed that life was just about gang banging and staying in the hood, and like, basically they were worthless. That was all they were. That was destined in their life. And unfortunately, that's a majority. And so it's really important that we start these youth as young as possible to see that difference. And I really think that putting their hands in the soil and watching a seed grow, into something so beautiful, and doing the breath work and the energy work is definitely something that can shape us into stemming into something greater than what we think we deserve because of, our circumstances. So I hope I didn't take too much time. I'll go ahead and take a break there and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Jessa, so much for all those gentle reminders, of the importance of connecting with the land, connecting with one another, and also just the importance of, like, the spaces that we're in, right? Like, what are these spaces exposing us to? So I'm going to take some time and look at the chat. So Lucha here says, this is reminding me of what has been going on at Jordan High School for many years in regard to literal toxic contamination of the soil and the unsafe learning environment due to the recycling center next door. Thank you, Jessa, for pinpointing how energy works to make us grow healthy. And then Alex shared an article here about Jordan High School. So if anyone's interested in reading more, it's there. Thank you for your beautiful gift, for offering your beautiful gift. And again, just thank you for all these reminders. Lucha here says, I need to speak to myself more gently. And, I think many of us can relate to that, right? We know that we can do a better job at taking care of ourselves and speaking to ourselves in a gentle way. And, Jessa, I just want to say that, you reminded us of how practical it can be to take care of ourselves, right? With the breath work and with kindness. And, through my work, I'm witnessing that there's a young generation of, youth and children who, because of the pandemic, are really struggling to connect with one another. So thank you for that.